G'day guys, Mac with the Circle. I want to do a video talking about the problems with 8th edition and more so the remedies that I can see for it. Now, that's a bit of a tough one to put together because immediately people are just going to go, I like 8th edition and 7th edition is crap, and that's going to be their argument. I want to try and avoid that, so I've got to be very careful with how I word it. So that one hasn't been made yet, but it is coming because I think we're reaching critical mass with 8th edition where people are starting to go, hang on a minute, what direction is this bloody going in? Anyway, to the topic at hand. The Primarchs. I spoke in a previous video on the Horus Heresy War about the traitor Primarchs and why they each fell to chaos. I want to take this opportunity to talk about each of the Primarchs and what I think their specific ability is and what their role would have been in an Imperium after the Great Crusade. So, with that in mind, where do we start? Well, the guy on the left of the screen is Lionel Johnson, the Lion. So, his genetic traits are most like the Emperor. He's the First Legion in general no sort of speciality. They're just average, but great at everything. So, with that in mind, the Lion, being very similar to the Emperor, has a similar mindset. All about efficiency, means to an end, that sort of thing. And in the books, they really talk about how he really seems to be able to deal with normal humans and manage affairs of state. So I think his role is the statesman of the Imperium. The guy who does a lot of the talking with the politicians, finds out what their concerns are, that sort of thing. Very simple. And again, the novels really go into this, how like other Primarchs struggle when talking with ordinary humans. The Lion, whilst he can't identify with ordinary humans, it's just completely beyond him, he's able to take on board what they say, process it, and then make his plans accordingly. So he would be the statesman in an Imperium. Because again, the whole point of this is to free up the Emperor, so he doesn't have to really do anything, because he's been working his ass off for thousands of years. He wants to put it in other people's hands. So the Lion will take over the day-to-day dealing with the politicians, because apparently he's really good at it. The next Primarch is Fulgrim. Now, Fulgrim always aimed for perfection, and I think that his particular role in the Imperium would have been the inspiration. The one who's always pushing to come up with new ideas, to try and advance themselves, to become better as a whole. Now, obviously, this was also his major flaw, but I think their strength and their flaws are sort of intertwined with one another in all the Primarchs. In Fulgrim's case, say, another Primarch goes, I've created a weapon, and it might be a fantastic weapon. Well, along will come Fulgrim, and Fulgrim will be like, hang on a minute, how's about we try and make it even better again? Which you need, because you don't want stagnation, because stagnation means that enemies can come at you, and you won't be prepared because you become isolated. Think feudal Japan, after the Warring States period, and after the Tokugawa shogunate is formed, Japan, who's isolated, doesn't let other people in, their culture sort of stagnates in a way. They just perfect what they are. And all of a sudden when Oliver Hazard Perry rocks up, I think it's Oliver Hazard Perry, rocks up in Tokyo Harbour, or Edo Harbour at the time, in the 1860s, I'm thinking. Again, not a huge historian when it comes to Japan and American history or their relations with one another in the 1800s, but in any case, they rock up in steam-powered warships with modern cannons and armour plating, and the Japanese are still riding horses firing bows at people. Now, not to say they weren't an advanced culture, but they were a stagnant culture. They weren't bringing out new things, experimenting like the West was. The West was innovating so much in the industrial age. Well, Fulgrim's there to prevent that stagnation for the Imperium, I think. The next Primarch along is Perdido. Now, Perdido's an odd one, because we think of like fortifications, strength of will, that sort of thing. but they're niches he was pushed into as a side effect of his character. Keeping in mind that Perdido was basically a source of all knowledge, he was born with innate knowledge. He just knew how to do things that other Primarchs may have had to learn. Perdido, from the day he could first remember, knew how to forge swords. He knew how to design great buildings. Now, it didn't mean he knew everything, but he knew so much just innately. I think his role is actually the architect of the Imperium. The guy who would design the great amphitheatres and the halls and the monumental architecture. Someone who could analyse the webway to create new things within it, to learn how to work with maybe wraithbone and other material. That would be his role, the architect of the Imperium. The next Primarch along, Jagat Khan. Now, where does he fit in? Well, his personality is very much the fringes. So I think he would be the one who is always at the edge of the Imperium, just keeping an eye out for threats from the void. For example, the Tyranids. Chances are their legion, the White Scars or Jagat, would be the ones who look out for these threats and would encounter them first. The Pathfinders of the Imperium. This is very much the sort of vibe you get from the books. Now, there are other Primarchs whose roles may sound similar to this, but I really want to stress that he would engage them. He's not a spy, he's not performing sabotage, any of that sort of thing. He is a scout, a patrol on the fringes of the galaxy. Never one to be tied down, never one to let his guard down, which is, again, very important. The next Primarch, of course, Leeman Ross, and we know what what he is. He's the Emperor's executioner, his judgment. So, someone steps out of line, you send in Leeman Ross, chop heads, get it sorted out. Really basic, really simple, and that's something the Emperor has used him for from basically the beginning. So we know that is his role. Really not much more to it. The next Primarch along, of course, is Rogel Dawn. Lovely chap swinging the giant chainsword on the right of the screen. Now, stern old Rogel Dawn. He's the Praetorian of Terror, and like Horus, is a Primarch who is given his role. The Emperor wants to use Rogel Dawn to fortify his Imperium. Now, where Perdido may be the architect who designed things, Dawn's the one who implements the designs. The builder. So the two should work hand in hand in theory. Perdido would design something, Dawn would make it happen. The next Primarch along is, funny enough, the guy on the right of this same picture I used earlier, Conrad Curse. Now, what does a maniac like Conrad Curse with foresight have going for him? Well, I like to think the foresight was something he should have been able to control, but of course, gene seed flaws are a thing, circumstances may change that. Conrad Curse is the judge, jury, maybe the executioner, although that's more Russ. Conrad Curse is born with this instilled sense of justice, and I think he would have been the lawmaker of the Imperium if he'd been raised correctly. Now the problem is, of course, Curse was a maniac, because he resorted to violence first and torture and those sort of things. But he would have been more the King Saul of biblical fame. He would have been the one who resolves conflicts, passes the appropriate judgments. The appropriate judgment may be to send the Space Wolves to deal with someone, but in any case, he would be the one responsible for all the laws. Very important role within the Imperium. And, of course, the punishment for breaking said laws. The next Primarch along is, of course, Sanguinius. Sanguinius embodying so many of the Emperor's abilities, and the fact that Guilliman uses him as a figurehead of the Imperium Secundus. I think Sanguinius would be basically the head of the Imperium, the figurehead. Whilst the Lion is there dealing with the politicians from day to day, Sanguinius would be the guy who's out the front for the people to see. Look at the angel, how impressive is he? Oh, we need to worship him. Because again, the Emperor doesn't want to be doing all these roles. So that's where Sanguinius would come in. Sanguinius would be something to aspire to, the angel. Was he meant to have wings? We don't know. Sanguinius thinks it's probably a chaos corruption within him, but that only drives him on to further and further better himself, to make sure he doesn't fall to temptation. He is a lot like Lionel Johnson. He's very much the embodiment of the Emperor in his purest form. Ferrus Manus. Now, this is a funny one, but I think the Gorgon's role is to design the military might of the Imperium. It seems to be something that came naturally to him. He explored, he wandered, he came across technology on his own prior to even excluding the fact that he squashed a Necron worm in lava and got the silver arms. He is a master of the forge. He is a creator, and he would probably create the weapons of war for the Imperium, perhaps some sort of oversight over the Mechanicum, eventually perhaps even being promoted to the Fabricated General, because with enough time the Mechanicum slowly would have been integrated into the Imperium, probably to the point where Ferrus Manus becomes basically the head of the Mechanicum. It just makes sense, especially being a Primarch. Unlike Fabricated Generals who can die and will die of old age, as a Primarch, oh boy, will he get a long life, and you'd have stable rule within the Mechanicum. Next is the chap on the left here having the lovely fight with Leeman Ross, Angeron. Now, Angeron, I think, judging from what little he does do that's not affected by the Butcher's Nails, I think brotherhood was his defining trait. And I think in a perfect world where he hadn't been corrupted by the Butcher's Nails and forced to live out as a slave, betrayed by his father, he would have been the one to unify the Primarchs and hold them together, to keep the rivalries in check. Which is very important when you have, maybe someone would think I could be a better statesman than the Lion, or why does Dawn, the Praetorian of the Emperor, I could be the Praetorian of the Emperor. So, this is where Angeron comes in. He would have been the glue that held the Primarchs together, because when the nails weren't affecting him, he was actually a pretty nice guy. He looked after his men, they looked after him, and it just seems to be the trait I get out of him. And it makes sense that someone would be there to keep all the different personalities in check. Now, this time fighting Angeron, we've got Burboot Guilliman on the right. Now, I think it's pretty clear that he is the logistician. He's the logistics master behind the Imperium. He's the one who would organise the taxes and things like that on different worlds, the tithes, organise recruitment of military forces, that sort of thing. That's clearly his role. It's what he aspired to personally, and it's what he did best. It's the same role that he was given within the Imperium Secundus to get shit done. The guy behind the scenes who does all the tireless work to keep everything running. And running smoothly. Next along, we have Mortarion. Now, Mortarion's a funny one, but I think with his innate abilities to resist toxins and chemicals and that sort of thing, he would be sort of one of the enduring backbones of the Imperium in their warfare from this point on. Very much someone who you would send into the hostile environments, perhaps the witch hunter of the Imperium even. So, one that you can trust to fight the psychic threats of the Imperium, because it seems he has this innate anti-psyker ability about him. Now, whilst a less defined role, and you might think, hey, why would psykers be such a thing, especially if you're depriving the Chaos Gods of worship through the atheist beliefs of the Imperium? Well, they're going into the webway. Humanity is meant to be moved into the webway by the Emperor, and once they're within the webway, well, they're in a psychic realm. Demons of all different kinds can manifest. We're not just talking the great gods of chaos, but thoughts, beliefs. Eldar gods, for example, are a type of demon. The orcs have warp weapons. Many alien species had warp weapons, and he would be the Imperium's bulwark against this, as well as his innate resistance to toxins and that sort of thing. Magnus, the glowing ethereal guy in the background of this image, his role is another one that we do know for certain. he was to power the Golden Throne, to guide the Imperium into the webway, and also to move the Imperium's armies from point A to point B without having to spend weeks, months, even years trapped in the warp. The whole idea of Magnus was to control the Imperial military in the regard of getting them from point A to point B, as I said. So, really simple role. Yeah, maybe he had some responsibility with perhaps training psychers or such, but really I think the Emperor was trying to curtail psychic development. So Magnus's role very much then becomes simplified if you take that approach to, hey, let's get the mankind into the warp. The Emperor, of course, isn't going to sit on the Golden Throne for eternity. Well, he is now, but that's thanks to other problems. So yeah, Magnus, he would get us into the webway. Horus, another one whose role we know, the War Master. Now, he's the only one, apart from Dawn, who's given his role within the Imperium whilst the Great Crusade is still going on. And the reason I think behind this is the Emperor still needed the other Primarchs to be generals. He couldn't assign them to their new roles within the Imperium yet, because there were wars still to fight. Now, it was starting to wind down, and that's why he started to give them their new roles, but at the same time, it hadn't finished yet. You don't just delegate out all these responsibilities and roles at once. You've got to ease people into it. You've got to ease the Imperium into it. And that's where Horus comes in. As the War Master, he's first and foremost among his brothers. He is the guy who will be the general of the Imperium's armies moving forward, as all the other Primarchs are pulled away from the front lines, save perhaps Leeman Ross, Mortarion, Jagat. Horus steps forward and leads the Marine legions. The administrative and civil responsibilities he's given would be passed on to probably the Lion, Sanguinius, and Guilliman, taking a lot of that burden off Horus, because it is something that Horus struggled with, but it was done out of necessity because the Emperor was trying to get the Warp project kicked off, or the Webway project, I should say. Lorgar. Lorgar is another funny one, where what a crazed religious zealot, what would be his role? And I think he's the iconoclast of the Imperium, the herald of the Emperor, the one who would basically be the propaganda master, inspire devotion within the people to worship the Emperor. Well, not worship him, that's using the wrong, that's his beliefs. More just, how good is the Emperor, like political propaganda today. Because you wouldn't have political parties, you don't want that divisiveness. Instead, you want solidarity, and he would be the architect of that solidarity. Rousing speeches, propaganda on the televisions, perhaps even, whilst not having churches, I imagine something similar to the Nazi Party, Nuremberg rallies, that kind of thing, where he would get up in front of the population of a planet and, how good is the Emperor, how great is the Imperium, look at this time of peace we live in, you're not afraid of alien threats like Dark Eldar raids from the Webway anymore, being enslaved by all these horrible different species and suffering thousands of agonizing different kinds of death and destruction. How good is the Emperor? Let's not rebel. That would be his job within the Imperium. And again, very suited to it. Because what better than a person who believes in something himself so strongly than to inspire other people? If you know someone believes in something, you're a lot more likely to follow them, aren't you? Next up we have Vulcan. And Vulcan's role, I think, speaks to his humble nature. He is the humility that the other Primarchs lack, and I think his role in the Imperium would be the one who understands mortals. So whilst the Lion may be the statesman who takes on their concerns, our planet is, suffering critical water shortages, the Lion would then pass that to Guilliman and say, you need to sort out water facilities on this planet. Guilliman would then task, say, Perdido, would you design a set of aqueducts for this planet? And then Dawn would set about building it, maybe the way that it works out. Well, Vulcan's there he's the humble nature of the Primarchs, to listen to the concerns of the petty, the one who may say, look, I really do believe this is a major problem for this planet, and we do need to take it into account, because, hey, we may be superhumans, but normal people, they really need their water on that planet. You know, we can't just think of ourselves here. Yes, it may not be a huge priority in this huge Imperium, but it has to be done. And that sort of humility, that sort of down-to-earth nature, is something that so many of the Primarchs lack. I think that would really be his role. The next one along is Corax. Now, Corax, the ability to sort of go stealth that he has to become invisible, he would be the spy master of the Imperium. Now, this is not to be confused, we'll say, with the Alpha Legion, because I think that's something different again, which I'll go into in a moment. But his job would be to observe the enemy, observe internal threats within the Imperium, keep an eye on people. And he would report to, say, Conrad Curse, who would then deliver the judgment on the people that are found guilty, whatever that judgment may be. Now, Faris. Everyone thinks of the Alpha Legion as being spies, but Raven Guard were very good at stealth, reconnaissance, that sort of thing. I think that the Alpha Legion under Faris, they would become the saboteurs, implementing the black operations of the Imperium. So, whilst yes, the Raven Guard may be able to turn invisible, conduct their operations, well, the Alpha Legion will be the ones who go, hey, maybe we need to sabotage this planet. Maybe we need to lead an assassination mission to kill this person. You know, that's their sort of role. So, there you go. That's what I think the Primarchs' roles are. Now, there are two missing Primarchs. I theorise, I sort of spoke to a few people about this. I theorise that one of the missing Primarchs probably had something to do with science and medicine. Okay, because, hey, medical ailments are still a thing, and no Primarch has that trait out of all the other Primarchs we know. We know of 18 Primarchs. None of them has a fetish for medicine. So, that's definitely one that I could see one of the Primarchs that was lost, his thing being. As for the other Primarch, I can only guess. If one was perhaps medicine, perhaps he was a navigator or a pathfinder, someone who could find the routes in the webway, I don't know, something like that. Again, nothing to go on here, just an educated guess from what roles the Imperium might need and doesn't have. So, what are your thoughts? Do you think I'm on the money here with what the Primarch's roles and responsibilities were, or do you think I'm completely off the mark? I'm Mac with the Outer Circle, thank you all for watching this episode, and we'll see you all next time.